Welcome to Ask Clem Today. Today what we're going to do is just to kind of give you a basic overview of some tools. I know that perhaps some of you may have experience, and perhaps some of you may not know exactly what is a Phillips screwdriver or a flat screwdriver, and we're going to go ahead and take care of that today. And so we're going to look into for like basic carpentry and also a little bit of electrical that we're going to show you. So to begin with, I want to start with the basic pencil. So as you can see that this pencil is something that we use on a regular basis. But it's funny that we don't use too many carpenters using this type of pencil. And one of the reasons is because the lead is just so thin that by the time you do several markings and all that, it's gone. And then before you know it, it's sharpening again. So that's why we normally see carpenters or people using this type of pencil. Perhaps the green one can show it better. See, this type of pencil, it's kind of weird shape, isn't it? It's like oblong, it's a 1/4 inch thick, and it's got a bigger lead. And some of the reasons for this is the bigger lead, like we talked about, having more lead, it makes it easier, it lasts a little longer for it to do some marking before it wears away. The other thing that this pencil is also good for is for spacing when you're doing decking. On the decking, you must have a space. Overall, the 1/4 inch gap is ideal, so sometimes you will see carpenters using this type of pencil as for the gap, and many other things that you can use it for gap that requires a 1/4 inch. So that's what's nice about this. But sometimes people say, well, how do you sharpen such a weird pencil? Well, believe it or not, there's actually a sharpener. Here's the sharpener right here. So you can see it. And it's got a way where this will enter and keep it steady, and as you spin it, it sharpens it. So there is a specific sharpener for this type of pencil, but some people don't get this. So what do they sharpen with? Well, overall, you see people using what they call is a box knife. So this box knife, you see people just sharpen it like that. So that's another option that you can do. So now, your basic tools. Here you have a couple of screwdrivers. Now this screwdriver, this is a Phillips because it's got the star, and this is your flat screwdriver. Your flat screwdriver. And then you got your Phillips. Now this Phillips, they call it is a number 2. Phillips number 2, or people call it the star, but it really is not star. It's just people are not familiar with what it is. It's called a Phillips screwdriver. There is a bit that's called a star bit, and we don't want to get those confused. They have tips like 1 through 4, and because of the size of your screw can be bigger. So typically a typical screw will be a number 2. So it's ideal to have a number 2 Phillips screwdriver in your tool pouch. Another basic tool, especially if you're going to be doing like LEDs or electronics, wiring, is this tool here that looks like a pair of dikes in order to cut wire. And then you have this other tool, it's a pair of pliers with the dikes also, but this is flat, so you can be able to twist wires. Also basic tools that you need. For carpentry, not necessarily a need. For AV department, when you're doing LEDs, this is called a wire stripper, and it's got a whole bunch of different sizes for different size strippers for different size wire. And I have a separate video on how to use this particular tool in the LED video. This guy is a little pair of pliers that I use. It's a vice grip, tiny one. I've had this close to almost 35 years or a little longer. It's my go-to. Nice little pair of pliers to have. So don't forget, you need some good markers. This particular marker can even write on dirty stuff and it lasts compared to others. So having a good pair of markers is an ideal. This is a tool pouch that I carry with me all the time. It's got my electrical tape that I have, especially if you're doing low voltage. Just big enough to have just the basic tools, even my tester for electrical, just to make sure I don't get shocked and all that. Even though I work with low voltage, sometimes you come across with high voltage, you want to make sure it's off. So this is a nice little handy tool. The other basic tool obviously is our hammer with a nice claw to it in order to pull nails if you're going to be nailing, or a nice hammer in order to drive in nails. They have different sizes, different weights, but personally I like using screws whenever I'm doing some woodworking, but in some situations you do need to drive some small nails and all. And then you have the different saws. So you have a saw like this, little small one. They got them a lot longer, but notice the teeth. These teeth are a little bit on the heavy duty side, where it's for a rough cut. And then you have this type of saw that has the teeth are a little bit smaller for a little finer cut. So the saw will depend, and these guys ain't that expensive, you know, think under 20 bucks that you can use. Now, talking about cutting, I have these guys. So this is a plastic called a miter cut, where you can do a straight cut this way, or you can do a 45 cut by putting it in like this. And that's if you don't have a chop saw that you can cut it real quick, and or if you're doing a small job, small pieces, then this will be ideal. These guys basically they hold the wood for you. They got this particular one has a whole bunch of holes, so then once you put your wood in there and you just kind of twist, it holds the wood in place. It's almost like having a third or fourth hand, and then you can cut your piece going back and forth. So this one's in plastic, and then we got this one that's made out of wood. Same concept, where you can do your 45, and also has an angle, so you can cut there, and there's my straight. So now, some basic tools that we have would be these squares. They're different colors, made out of plastic. One's long, one's short, but they have all these little funky grooves that you can use. And what's nice about these, this will help you to make a straight cut if you need it, even a 45 angle cut, simply by putting it right to the wood, and it gives you that straight edge there that you can use your pencil in order to mark it. What's nice about this is, if you notice here, I have different marks with pencil that I'm able to mark. If I'm doing something consistently, then I can just go ahead and mark it there. But what's nice about it is you got even these grooves that if you have a pencil, you can put your pencil in that groove. If you want, for example, that's 2 inches, and then also you just kind of score it down, and it gives you a perfect 2-inch line all the way down. So that's what these little grooves are for here, which is pretty nice. And there's more that you can do. Again, we're just going to do the basic on the square. There's so much more you can learn in how to use one of these guys. When it comes to drilling holes, there's so many different bits out there. One, you have this guy. Some call them the paddle bit. Now this paddle bit happens to be 3/4 of an inch, and basically it just takes all the meat out and makes a mess, but you can create bigger holes with these paddle bits. So those are called paddle bits. That's if you wanted a bigger hole than your typical. Now, like you can see in this kit, I also have paddle bits, and I have 2 types of drill bits. I have for concrete and I have for wood. Now, how do I know which is which? Well, I don't know if you can see, but that wood, this one's got a little tip, and that's for wood to start your drilling. Then the concrete bit has little side flanks on the side, and that kind of sticks out, and that's how you know that's for concrete only. So the wood bit, you could also use it in drywall, by the way. Now we have these clamps. I love these clamps. This is an Orwin clamp, as you can see there. It's an Orwin clamp, and this one is a quick grip clamp. I love these better because for every one stroke, it's such a tighter grab compared to this. But the nice unique things about these guys is got a little rubber padding so it won't damage your work. And what you do is you take this handle here, start squeezing, and you can see it getting smaller until you grip your product so it won't move on you. Now if you want to release it, there's a little lever here. This lever here, squeeze it and then pull back. And that's how that releases. Now you see how it stops? Now if I want to go closer, instead of cranking, just closer and then start cranking. And that's how you operate one of these clamps. Again, same concept. It's a little lever here. Open it up, slide it, and then start squeezing once you get to your product. So what we have here, this particular tool is a jigsaw. It goes up and down. This one is by Bosch. And what's nice about these particular jigsaws, they're portable. You can do turns, sharp turns with it. Again, depending on the blade. And the blade just kind of goes up and down. And this particular one, to change the blade, is basically you pull back on this guy here, and then you just go counterclockwise. As you go counterclockwise, make sure it's unplugged. Then you just turn the blade and it pops right out. It's got a little design to this blade. And then to put back one in, slide her in counterclockwise, and you hear it ratchet right there. And then just pop it in place. Now what's so unique about this particular design of jigsaw is that here it has a little lever, and that lever has like 3 settings. So a typical jigsaw, the blade goes up and down, but when you put it on level 2, all of a sudden it goes down and it kicks, down and it kicks, down and it kicks, down, like that, to make it so much easier to cut, and it'll cut like butter, especially if you have a nice sharp blade. And so this here, the base, you can actually move it in order to tilt it to go left and right. This particular one will use an Allen wrench in order to loosen that up to tighten it. Some of them do have a little gauge that you can put on here in order to kind of keep straight. Typically a lot of guys don't use that. This button here is so you can lock it while it's running. You go ahead and squeeze the trigger, press this button, and it'll keep going, and then you can just focus on your cut instead of the trigger and the cut. And then you squeeze it and it lets go. In here, there's a little adjuster that you can control the speed or the depth of the trigger so it won't go as fast. This Allen wrench is so I can use it in order to adjust right here this base plate in order to give it that angle. This is so you can put a vacuum on there, so as you're cutting, all the sawdust will go into your vacuum system. So that's your jigsaw that I like a lot by Bosch. Power tools come into place. So you have your drill, and then you have your impact driver. So I explained the difference between each one. I'll start off with the impact driver. So the impact driver, you can see it's nice and small. There's 2 buttons. Now there are many types of products out there, and everybody's got their own favorite and all that. To me, I love DeWalt. The problem with DeWalt, it's because the batteries didn't last long. Several years ago, I ended up getting the RIDGID, and the nice thing about the RIDGID is lifetime warranty. You buy it as a kit, and anything happens, they'll replace it with no problem. Now, the RIDGID, what I like about it is light. There are others that are lighter. This particular one is a 9 amp battery. They do have an 8. They do have one that's a. These are 4 amp. This is a 4 amp battery. They even have smaller amp battery. The smaller it is, the less time you'll be able to be using it, and the higher the amp, 9, the longer it'll hold the juice. But these particular ones, this one is an 18 volt. There's actually 24 volts out there to give you more power. So it all varies on what you want to do. For people that are doing housework, some people go with Makitas. To me, Makita has improved so much from the years that when I was in aviation, where Makita was just strictly for household. But if you're doing this on a regular basis and you want something that it'll endure, then you got the DeWalt, you got the RIDGID. So the impact driver, as you can see, I hit a switch here and the flashlight came out. Helps you to see where you're going to put it. And then you have these bits that's your Phillips number 2 bit that you can put in here. This one here, you push forward and then you slide this in, you hear it click. Now it won't come out. And then to pull it out, it just slides right out. You push this out and your bit slides right out. Boom. So there's your bit. And so now what's nice about this, it's an impact, and you do have different velocities up here, like different strength, 1, 2, and 3, where it's basically impacting your bolt or screw to go in tighter than what you would use a screw gun. So the impact driver is to put in bolts, screws, tighten nuts. In fact, they even have these guys. These are sockets that I can take this guy out, put this socket in here, and now it'll drive a bolt or a nut with this driver. So really, the impact driver is a must, because if you're building a decking that has bolts, carriage bolts, or different types of bolts, this is the way to go, especially long ones. I've driven 9-inch bolts on pergolas with ease. You can actually even use longer drivers like this guy. See how long it is. Now, when it comes to drills, we call this a drill. Now, the bits to do a hole is called a drill bit. So it goes in the drill. Now, for this, in the old days, you used to have a chuck key in order to tighten it, but that's gone. Now you can use your hand by sliding this over. And some people, in fact, look, I can go here, squeeze this, and I'm holding the bit. Now it takes practice to make sure you get it square. And so now it's square, and then you just tighten it. You hear it ratchet, and it's nice and tight. In order to loosen it up, you just spin it, boom. It's that easy. These things has changed how people use drills. It's so much easier. You don't have to look for your chuck key. Sometimes a chuck key would wear out, and it would be a pain to look for it. Sometimes they would tie a string to it and it'll be dangling. Now there's no more chuck to it, which is nice. So again, this particular one happens to be a hammer drill also. So remember those concrete bits? Those concrete bits, you need to use a hammer drill in order to drill them properly. And on the side here, it actually shows for either drill or putting a screw or hammer. And it's just a matter of switching it to that particular area. So what's nice about it is having a hammer drill and a drill in the same tool is priceless. So if you are going to get one, make sure it has a combination of those. Okay, and then the speed is just a matter of, so here I have it where it's spinning faster, or you can go slower, especially if you're drilling through stainless steel that needs to go slower on there. When it comes to charging, you have double or single chargers, and basically you plug this in. There's two buttons here. Squeeze the button, pull out. That's how it comes out. And then you're to put this slider in, and then the lights in here will indicate if it's charging on you. Once it's fully charged, it'll either go off or go solid, the colors, then you know it's fully charged. Some of them can charge as quickly as 20 minutes, others is half hour, and the battery can last you an hour or two depending on the type of load you're working on. On this guy, my battery will last longer, probably 3 hours, depending again on the load that I'm doing. I do carry extra batteries in here when I do jobs, because if for any reason I like some to be charging while I'm working on others. Imagine just most of the time you'll either get one battery with your product, sometimes two. So it would be a pain if you were to be working, and also you got to wait for your charge. So it's always good to have a backup. So this is your guard, and as you can see here, the depth of your blade. So you can actually move this in and it becomes that deep, or you can move this out and it only becomes that deep. You can always go that thin there. I'm going to show you how to do a straight cut, either the circular saw or you can use it with this jigsaw here by using the square. So let's say that you want to cut right here. You put a line. You can see it. Now what you need to know is the distance between this edge and the edge of the blade. And so normally I would have this supported off the edge, but let's say that would be it right there. So I would kind of like hold this real tight this way or this way, whichever one is easier. I would go ahead and see how this is stopping. I would go ahead and put that like that. Of course you're on the ground, and then you just use this as a straight edge. Boom. So the square comes in handy in order to create straight edges.